Let me say it again. I believe health care is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all right? You want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing?
Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
This is the MTC Report. I've written at Huffington Post. I blog at Daily Kos. I'm also a guest columnist at the Capitol Hill Times. I'm also contributing editor for Democracy Watch News. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. So, here I am in Seattle, the beginning of the new year, and I have thoughts about where this new year may be taking us. I know some of you are a little bit anxious, and I'm with you, okay? But these are my thoughts. I'm sitting here where I record my music and have a lot of great creative time to sit and think and write, and this is what I've come up with. My hopes for the new year are quite simple, actually. After witnessing a very nasty and controversial election for president, including accusations of foreign interference, many residents of the United States are still feeling a bit uncertain about what 2017 may bring in terms of changes in politics, media, economics, civil rights, and ecology. Well, following these emotional and unpredictable roller coaster rides that we've all been on, it's not surprising that many folks might be experiencing some well-founded public apprehension. As a result, new coalitions are being formed to address those issues, including activists, educators, and organizers who are worried that their efforts to encourage progressive policies may have been in vain in light of the current right-wing corporatist trends that we're seeing coming from this new administration in Washington, D.C. Popular points of view reflect an all-time low in regards to the trust factor, folks. Many members of both political parties are very unhappy with their own leadership at this time. And let's face it, a lot of independents think that both the Democratic and the Republican parties are simply corrupt clubs for millionaires. Locally, in Seattle, this opinion is being expressed in numerous ways, including an ongoing series of community meetings that have been taking place all around the city. These well-attended gatherings began with a mass convergence after the election of Donald Trump. So, with this context in mind, here are some of my simple wishes for the new year. I hope that our political system is able to reform itself enough to begin to directly address the vital issues that we all face across the country. These issues include, but are not limited to, threats to our democracy, threats to fair elections, the use of fossil fuel and the resulting environmental damage because of that, extreme economic inequality, which is something that Bernie Sanders talked a lot about during his campaign for U.S. president as a Democrat, and the normalization of racial prejudice and bigotry, which is something that I know a lot of journalists and editors that I work with are very concerned about. So far, there hasn't been much evidence that our traditional institutions are up to the task of dealing with these major challenges. I hope that the many highly compensated corporate CEOs, managers, and stockholders will learn to display responsibility and compassion when it comes to controlling economic and natural resources. Treating workers with respect would be nice. Let's look at monopolizing the markets, which is not free enterprise. That's monopoly capitalism. And the displacement of populations because of this economic refugee phenomenon that we're experiencing in Seattle. May I remind you that in Seattle and Martin Luther King Jr. County, a civil emergency has been declared because of the increase in homelessness. So a lot of corporate influences are moving into Seattle. A lot of tech companies and biomed companies are taking over and building billion-dollar Amazon-style development projects. Meanwhile, a lot of people are living in homeless camps all over the city because they can't afford to live here anymore. The rents have gone through the roof. Real estate is very expensive now. Seattle used to be a very inexpensive city, but now we're going the way of San Francisco and New York City. So I hope that some of these CEOs and their stockholders consider how adversely they have been affecting culturally vibrant communities like Seattle. And this has gone on all across the country, where condos are going up everywhere, and it's too expensive to live in the city. Basically, you have professionals, and then you have service industry jobs. That's all there is. Well, I also hope for an improvement in our international relations and in our reputation as a democratic and globally conscious nation. I also wish for a recommitment to the First Amendment guarantee to freedom of the press. I hope for a move towards higher professional standards in journalism and more honesty in reporting. There's an impression amongst a lot of media democracy activists that the media giants, the corporate networks that have replaced journalistic integrity with crass profiteering, have basically relied on sensationalism. Lately, I find it's become more difficult to determine whether some of the so-called fake news stories are actually coming from previously trustworthy national news networks.
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news, with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
I've been criticized saying that, let me say it again. I believe health is a right of all people. I will fight for a Medicare for all single-payer system. Second of all right? You want to talk about rationing? You got 29 million people in this country who have no health insurance. How's that for rationing? They can't go to the doctor.
I know what Walter Cronkite would say, because I've read his autobiography multiple times. He'd be totally disgusted by the often vapid and illiterate superhype machine that's now become the U.S. news media. Media pundits certainly did a lousy job of predicting the results of the most recent election for president. New forms of authentic, responsible, and independent media sources will have to be created to inform us of what's really going on. And of course, a lot of that is going on online. Without access to available platforms to speak the truth, accurate information will not be heard by a mass audience. Also, current restrictive control of U.S. media by multinational corporations is one of the major obstacles to press freedom, and one of the main reasons that Reporters Without Borders ranks the United States as 41st in the world in terms of press freedom. We can and must do much better than this. It's up to all publishers, all editors, producers, and journalists to speak out on the subject and to reform our own profession. Also, if any of these hopes and wishes are to be realized, the public must become engaged in the local and national dialogue. No more can you sit back passively and watch as the media and the political parties tell you what to do. New working class candidates have to rise up and run for office in this country. We cannot have our political representatives always be millionaires and billionaires. We need minority voices. We all have to support a varied variety of political voices, a diversity of opinion. That's the only way that democracy works.
Now here's a place you always need a lot of friends.
So these kinds of voices that aren't normally heard need now to be blasted through those loud campaign rally loudspeakers. I'm serious. Progressives, listen up. Either regain your political party, and you know which one I'm talking about, or why don't you just finally resolve to be done with the organization and let it die a natural death? To Republicans, I say, get away from people who use race and prejudice as a way of dividing you. And also, don't trust those people who say that they're populists, that they're for the working class, because they're a bunch of billionaires who are controlled by Wall Street, and that's who's running this country right now. It's been that way for a long time.
Picture a little love nest, the Democratic Party. On one side it votes for Bernie, but the leaders, they want Hillary. He's doing phone banks, he's taking polls, and every day his campaign grows. And don't forget, folks, that's what you get, folks. We're voting for Bernie, that Bernie Sanders guy. It's one big mess, the party's splitting. And can't you guess, he feels neglected, and she's suspected of sleeping with Wall Street.
Wall Street has been a problem in this country for a very long time. It's caused corruption and undue influence by corporate interests in our government.
To go. My point is, Chuck, there's massive rationing in America. It is rationing based on money. If you don't have money and you don't have insurance and you don't have, you have a high deductible and you don't go to the doctor when you should, what do you define that as? Other countries around the world make sure that the people have the medicine they need. When 1 out of 5 people can't afford those prescriptions, man, I call that.
And most of all, extremism in all its forms must be confronted directly and exposed as the destructive force behind all totalitarianism and political oppression. The historic events of 2017 have not yet been written or even acted out, so in that sense, the slate is still blank. The fact that no one has been able to accurately predict recent events proves that many possibilities still exist. My wish is for cooler heads to prevail, and I hope that some parts of this country will still continue to move forward with our experiment in diversity and economic and social opportunity. We have a lot of work to do in the coming year if we have any chance of avoiding an extremely regressive turn towards the bad old days of oligarchy, corrupt politics, and racial and gender discrimination. We are still fighting that long, continuous battle for civil rights that began in 1776. This is Mark Taylor-Canfield for the MTC Report. I'm also a musician, so you can check out some of my music online. And until next time, stay strong.
Or I how to hide.
This is the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield.
We can have a world-class healthcare system without waiting lines.